December 22, 1991. I woke up around 6 a.m. to the sound of our house creaking from the wind. I laid in bed next to Ashton and Grim and watched the heavy snow pass the window. I put on the news and waited for the meteorologist to cover the weather. Christmas is in a few days, we are supposed to get 8 feet of snow before then. It is going to be -14 degrees today with a wind chill of -25. The plows have not yet cleared our street, I am sure we are snowed in. Another murder happened in Northridge along with another kidnapping in North Oak. I lit a cigarette and sat up while they covered the theater fire again. Victor Euronymous was one of the many that perished that night. Around half an hour later, I started to feel Ashton stretching next to me, slowly rolling over. "Hey you," she said with a wide smile and dim eyes. "Good morning, love. How did you sleep?" I asked, standing up to stretch. "Not good really. I had another dream about Brock," she said, removing the covers. Ashton was homeless 2 months before I was. Just like myself, she had a small group she would sleep by for company so she would not be alone. One of the men in that group goes by the name Brock or by Mr. T. This man injected Ashton with heroin one night after she passed out drunk. Brock took advantage of Ashton in the worst ways possible. She has had frequent and vivid night terrors ever since. Sometimes she wakes me up and we talk, but most nights she handles it on her own. Waking up in the middle of the night, she gets dressed and walks down to the den. She will build a fire and write in her journal until it is time to come home. Like I said before, I was on my way to take my life when I found her. She was panning for money inside an overpass. This was to raise enough money to buy a round of ammo for a gun she found. This was so she could take her life. She tells me she could no longer take the night terrors or the fact that he still walks the subway tunnels of Merlot unpunished for his actions. This was someone she trusted, someone she counted on. What Brock did to Ashton happened 9 days before we met. Ashton removed the covers and stood next to the bed and started stretching with her arms above her head and back arched. "I am okay, I just really don't like it when I have these dreams," she said, walking over to me slowly. I held her for a few moments before pulling off of her. "You are amazing, you know that? The strongest woman I know," I said in a gentle tone. A conversation like this is one that she needs to lead, so I did not want to say too much. The fog was beginning to roll down our block, encompassing the houses. We could not see our tree line from our bedroom window. Today is Tuesday. Another day we had nothing planned other than that address. I made it a point not to set plans with Jake before he left. "I want no one over today. We have nothing to do until around 7 o'clock, the day is ours, darling," I said as I walked over to the desk by the window. "What do you want to do?" I asked. "Whatever we want, my love," Ashton replied, taking a sip of her coffee with a smile. "No North Oak today, we are going up the mountain later, let's do something different," I added. "Let's go into Merlot," Ashton said, putting on bottoms. "I can do that," I responded. We cleaned up our room and showered before we got dressed for the day. After, we hung out as MTV played music videos in the background. The snow was now starting to coming down harder than before. The wind blew strong outside the bedroom window. The scent of pine filled the room from Ashton's scented candles. "I'm going to paint you a picture, my love," she said before grabbing a blank canvas and the acrylic from the closet. She uncorked the bottle she brought up last night and poured some into a coffee mug. "I was looking at your records not long ago. I saw you already have the Brain Drain album. You have Ramones Mania. You have End of the Century, and you have Too Tough to Die. I might have to get your Rocket to Russia?" I said with a smile on my face as I continued to write. The Ramones released Rocket to Russia in 1978 and is an album Ashton has had her eye on since we passed it in Merlot months ago. "Remember that conversation we had a few months back?" Ashton asked. "The one about sexy time?" I responded. "Yes, that one," she replied. "What about it?" I asked. "Well, I might be feeling more adventurous with that record playing," she said, bringing the brush to the canvas. "But we will see, won't we?" she said, bringing her brush to the dark green paint on her palette. "We will see," I repeated as I cracked the window. "I'm going downstairs to grab a glass, I can taste a hint of coffee, I don't like it," she said as she got up from her chair. "Keep Grim here, he has been clawing at the door since we got back," she said, pouring her wine down the bathroom drain. I called Grim over and had him lay on the edge of the bed. The clouds were beginning to roll in, it was snowing a little heavier today. Ashton walked out of the bathroom, then shut the bedroom door behind her and made her way downstairs. I feel good today, I'm beginning to breathe again. I am looking forward to Merlot. Who the fuck are you? Who the fuck are you? There was no response. Woman, I will beat your fucking ass. Speak to me, Ashton screamed. Get the fuck out of our home. What the fuck are you looking at? I got up and grabbed the shotgun from under my bed. I loaded the gun as I rushed down the stairs. I turned the corner to see an older woman standing naked in the middle of our living room next to the fireplace facing the bottom of the stairs. She was completely still, and completely silent. Her skin pale, her eyes dark, her dirty crooked teeth could be seen from where we were. Her mouth hung partially open. She looked weathered with old, torn skin. There was a large branch, about 2 feet long, that lay on the floor beside her along with a pile of clothes. Every few moments, her mouth would begin moving, but no words escaped her lips. Get the fuck out of this house. Do not play games or I will end your shit, old cunt. You need to get your things and get out of our home. I am not going to tell you again, I stated with the barrel pointed at her head. The photo that I had kept in my backpack of Jacob and the man, was now on the couch beside her. Ashton walked into the kitchen and grabbed a fillet knife from the stand, as I stayed in sight with my finger rested on the trigger. Ashton then walked over to the house phone, dialed 911, and put it on speaker. After a few rings, she got through to dispatch. Ashton then walked back over to me and relayed our situation from where we were standing. The woman slowly turned to us, then looking at me dead in the eyes. She let out a scream that vibrated every bone in my body, both eyes began to secrete tears. There was no breath but a continuous, ear-piercing scream that did not stop for at least a minute. Like a body, to a car horn, it stayed at the same tone and same volume. The woman stopped abruptly and walked over to the couch. She began sobbing more intensely, slowly looking away from me and towards Ashton. She would stop crying, only to start again a few moments later. She grabbed the branch and the photo and walked over to the chair next to the fireplace. She continued to sob vigorously as she spread her legs open to both of us. She picked up the photo and held it in front of her face while she played with herself. She cried louder and louder while Ashton was trying to speak with dispatch. After a long pause, she began to giggle to herself, then picking up the branch. She is beginning to ram a large branch in her vagina, Ashton explained to dispatch as she shoved it further and further inside of herself. No, we haven't touched her. I don't know how she got in. No, we don't know her. I am sorry to interrupt, but she is now bleeding. She bleeding a lot, Ashton said towards the phone. Yes, from her vagina and no, she hasn't stopped. We stayed on speaker with dispatch as the woman repeated to mutilate her genitals with the branch as she began to scream again. I stood with the shotgun pointed at her face until the sheriff showed up. Blood had pooled beneath her. Get on the ground, ma'am, take it easy, get on the ground, the sheriff said walking over to her as she continued to scream while staring at Ashton in the face. 3 sheriff cars came to our house that morning along with an ambulance and fire engine. The 2 paramedics and 4 firemen struggled greatly to sedate her. It took every bit of manpower they had to get her onto that gurney. They did the best they could to tie her limbs to the rails of the gurney before loading her with sedatives. Once they left our front door, she began to become quiet. Her left pupil was as wide as its iris and looked to be completely dilated. Her head began to sway as her breathing slowed. Get a bag ready, paramedic Lamia said to his partner while one of the firemen took vitals. 6238, heart rate of 122, breathing 6 times a minute. Alert and oriented at 0, apparent trauma to the mouth. Her airway is becoming compromised, her blood saturation is at 72%. Lung sounds have rails bilaterally, he said as he followed the gurney down our driveway with a monitor by the woman's legs. They didn't even get to the ambulance before they had to start giving compressions. Ashton, the 2 sheriffs, and I walked out in the snow and watched the women get loaded into the ambulance. One fireman was pumping hard on her chest, while one of the medics stuck something down her throat. The other paramedic loaded medications into her while the second fireman radioed the hospital. The fire captain on the scene shut the doors to the ambulance and got back into the passenger side of the fire engine. Once they left the scene, the sheriff met us at the end of the driveway. "Before I start questioning, I'm going to secure your firearm," he stated. "It is just for our safety." I handed over the shotgun and watched him as he emptied the chamber. He then placed the gun on the hood of his truck. "There is blood on your floor in your living room, sir. How did that get there?" the sheriff said, taking out a notebook. "She was there when we came downstairs," Ashton said, sounding slightly annoyed. "There is blood on the branch. Care to tell me what that is about?" he said, looking at me. "She was jamming it inside of herself. I am not sure why or even how," I responded. "And how did she get in?" the sheriff asked. "I don't know, my only guess is the doggy door. My friends sneak in through it all the time," I replied. Ashton was shivering, so she left to go change. "I'm going to be right back, sir," she stated before walking up the driveway. "Sir, we did not touch her, if that is what you are thinking. We spent the entire morning upstairs in my room. We did not have the slightest clue she was inside. She didn't make a sound, and she was naked when we found her," I said, worried about where his head was at. "This looks bad for you, son. I know you understand that. I believe you did not touch her, but I must say it is strange that your name keeps appearing in our reports, not to mention last year Mr. Alamo's." "I know, sir. It has been a very rough week for the two of us. What happened then should not matter now," I replied. "We are going to have the two of you come into the office 10 days from now, Mr. Alamo's. We are going to need you and the lady to make an official statement. Make sure you arrive 30 minutes early to fill out the paperwork," he said, ripping off a sheet from his notebook. Ashton came back out after changing, and we signed an agreement to show up to the office in a few weeks. We walked the officers through the house. One took photos of the living room and kitchen. After, they took samples and removed the branch. I could not find the photo. Once everyone left, Ashton and I rolled up the rug and placed it in the garage. We went back and bleached everything we could. After a few hours of deep cleaning the house and the rug. After, we poured our drinks and smoked a little weed. It took half the day for two of us to calm down. I called my grandparents to check in. I did not tell them about it. I was not going to until they were home. Once we hung up, I put on a record and rested on the couch. We talked about everything. About the last few days, about everything that came to mind. It was hard for the two of us to pretend like everything was okay right now. It was not. I could tell Ashton was not doing too well either. We sat around the fireplace with our drinks, having periodic moments of happiness before the weight set in again. We went into Merlot. I bought Ashton the album. We went to a deli downtown and grabbed lunch before we tried seeing a film. We left 30 minutes into it. We were simply not feeling ourselves. The drive home was a bit rough. A couple of times I pulled over because everything would resurface. Ashton and I would begin to cry, sparking another discussion of the very thing causing it. It was like this the whole way home. The house felt empty, but strangely felt a little better than before we left. We poured some more drinks and killed some more time before packing our things to go to that address. It took a lot of pushing back, but we were beginning to feel our normal selves again as the sun began falling behind the neighboring summit. Now and then, I would get in my head and find myself mad. I tried my best to hide my anger, but I wasn't happy about any of this. Who the fuck would be? I'm sure Ashton is feeling exactly what I'm feeling. This has been exhausting. There has been too much in such a short period of time. We printed the directions, turned off all the lights, locked all the doors, and headed to the truck. The energy started to reappear in Ashton shortly after we pulled out of the driveway. It was good to see her smile.